Swadika and very good evening and welcome to the special edition of Thai PBS World as we're still covering the ongoing protests in Bangkok. I'm Nabunag.
And good evening, I'm Thep Chai Yong. And now we take you live to Ratchaprasong intersection, Bangkok's busiest commercial center, where thousands of demonstrators have been rallying for the past almost 4 hours. And this was in response to Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha's refusal to give in to the demand to resign by 10 p.m. last night. So the 10 p.m. was a deadline given by the protesters, but the deadline went by without any signs that the Prime Minister would give in. In fact, he told a group of people, including some media members, last night that he had no intention to resign. And this was a scene from the functions, religious function he attended last night, during which he was asked about the demand by the protesters. And when he didn't say outright whether or not he would consider the demand, but when he was approached by a group of well-wishers, he flashed a V for victory sign and then said, "I will not quit." And that was a remark he said to a group of well-wishers.
And after Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha told reporters that he will not resign as the protesters demanded earlier, the protests have already escalated since last night, where Pai Dao-din, one of the protest leaders, announced that they will escalate the protests and they will rally at Rapasong area today at 4 p.m. And as of today, demonstrators already gathered in front of Central World and Gaeson Plaza in the Rapasong area. At the same time, the Lumpini police have already asked them to disperse by 5 p.m. today, and right now is around 7:24 p.m. and you can see there are still tons of protesters rallying in the Rapasong area. And the thing is, the police also promised the protesters that they will not use any violence. And so far, the protests are still peaceful up until now.
The police insisted that the gathering was unauthorized because the organizers did not seek a prior approval from the authorities. And so the ongoing event is considered to be against the laws on public gatherings. And, but of course the police have made it clear that they have no intention to use force to disperse the demonstrators who, as we can see, that have ignored the police warning to disperse by 5 p.m. So this is the live scene from the area in front of Central World at the Ratchaprasong intersection. And certainly this is the same scene that we saw 2 weeks ago when the demonstrators took to the streets and then rally at the same spot to pressure Prime Minister Prayut to resign and for a new constitution to be adopted. And tonight, again, they insist on the third demand, that is the sweeping reform of the monarchy.
And one of the key protesters for today, Pai Dao-din, who was recently released from jail, he revealed that today's protest will still be a leaderless protest, just like a few days ago, because he believes that everyone is considered a leader. And for this round of protests, Pai Dao-din also repeated the same demand, is for General Prayut Chan-o-cha to resign.
It's quite obvious that the Pai Dao-din, whose real name is Jatupat Bunpatra Raksa, a long-time political activist, has taken charge of the rallies the past few days. And somehow he has become sort of a spokesman in a way for the protesters. And he was the one who has been communicating with the media, telling the media what the steps the protesters plan to take. Last night, for example, he was the one who announced that since Prime Minister Prayut did not respond to their 10 p.m. deadline, then Pai Dao-din took to the stage and announced that we would return to Ratchaprasong intersection 4 p.m. Sunday. That is today. So And the protesters lived up to their promise, and they all came out in full force.
And what we might notice is that Pai Daoden has become prominent for the past couple of days because the key protesters that we've been hearing, whether it's Penguin Shiwarak, Rum Panasaya, Mike Jatnok, all of these key protesters are still in prison. So we are seeing Pai Daoden more often communicating with the press as well as the supporters that they will continue with the rally to pressure the Prime Minister to resign, as well as other demands such as the reform of the monarchy as well as the redrafting of the Constitution.
So Pai Daoden is seen here speaking to the media earlier in the day when the protesters began to arrive at the intersections.
And there's also another highlight that we didn't even expect for today's protest is a group of drag queens representing the LGBT group. And we gotta say that this group really spiced up the protest today. That when we look at the protest, everything is quite intense, but the drag queens came out to not just to spice things up, but to support the protests that are demanding democracy, as well as to support the LGBTQ community in Thailand as well. And we gotta say, the costumes are pretty eye-catching.
Definitely. What you're seeing now is just one of clusters of activities organized by the protesters among this big crowd. So if you see from the bird eye view, you may see this sea of people, but among them we have cluster of activities like this, like the one by the LGBT groups. And of course, all these activities are designed to keep protesters entertained while waiting for what they say will be another announcement at around 8 or 8:30 p.m. tonight. And of course, tonight's demonstration at the Ratchaprasong intersection certainly will not be the last one. The protesters plan another major event tomorrow. So they have called for a rally to take place at Samyan area. And from that point on, they said they will march to the German embassy on South Sathorn Road, which is just a few kilometers away. And they have made known no definite plans yet as what they want to do at the German embassy. But of course, we can analyze what the intention is. It certainly has to do with something to do with the fact that His Majesty the King spent considerable time in that country each year, and this has become an issue in the German Parliament. So the protesters seem to want to seize on this issue and to highlight the demand for a reform of the monarchies. But we don't know exactly what the message they will try to deliver to the German embassy tomorrow, but there are concerns that things could be blown out of proportion, and then there could be something that will certainly anger the loyalists who are already up in arms against what they see as a threat by these protesters to the monarchy.
So basically, the protesters are not going anywhere if the Prime Minister does not resign and if the demands aren't met. And if you just joined us, this is the live footage from Ratprasong area, and you can see there are two different locations of the cameras right now. On the right-hand side, you're seeing more of a bird's eye view of the Ratprasong intersection, and the left-hand side is more what is happening on the streets. So you can see that the protests remain peaceful at the moment. Based on the information that we obtained, as for the activities for this demonstrations, at 6 p.m., which was an hour and a half ago, they flashed their three-finger salute during the national anthem, and up until now, we might be seeing a couple of protesters making speeches, which probably is relevant to their demands, whether it's the Prime Minister and the issues that are the political issues that are going on in Thailand. And at 8 p.m., it has been reported that protesters will gather together and chant Prayut get out for about 10 minutes. And after that, they will chant another slogan that we've been hearing a couple of days ago, very brave, very good, thank you. And the demonstrations might end around 8:30 p.m. today.
And of course, one of the chantings was release our friends in reference to a number of protest leaders who are still in police custody. And these protest leaders are being held in different locations, so some in Bangkok and at least one Anon Nampa, another outspoken critic of the government, is being held in Chiang Mai. And the protesters want an immediate release of these suspects and who have been charged for attending and organizing unauthorized gatherings and disturbing public peace and order.
And this is the one you just saw earlier. It was another side of Rapasong intersection where the cars are trying to get through, but the protesters are in the way. So the traffic is quite intense here. And compared to other days, right now the protests that are going on, you can still see some of the cars trying to get through the crowds.
Yeah, all right. As you all know, that Ratchaprasong is one of Bangkok's biggest and busiest commercial centers. So of course, I mean, the intention of the protester is to deliver the message by being there at the most sensitive location of the city. And in fact, Ratchaprasong is not new to this kind of demonstrations.
Definitely no stranger to any political protest in Thailand, especially during the past decade. If we all remember 10 years ago in 2010, the first major rally at Rapasong area was the red shirt protest against the Democrat Party-led government. The Red Shirts demanded the then Prime Minister Apisit Wechachaiwat to dissolve the parliament and hold elections before his term ended in 2012. And because of the failed negotiations, the army cracked down on the protesters. And if we all remember, there was violence at the intersection. One of them was protesters setting fire to buildings and the destruction of Central World, which is one of Bangkok's largest shopping malls. And many people have been injured, and more than 90 people lost their lives at that time because there's violence between the army and the red shirt protesters. And there's also another one in 2014 where Rapasong and Pathumwan intersections became political battlegrounds for the People's Democratic Reform Committee, or in Thai is commonly known as GPPS, which was led by the former Democrat Secretary General Suthep Thaugsuban, who declared the Bangkok shutdown at the time. And the main aim for that group was to force the then Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra to step down and hand the power over to an unelected People's Council.
And all we can say is that let's hope and let's pray that there will not be a repeat of the violence that we saw in the past.
Definitely.
And the demonstration at Ratchaprasong intersection today is taking place just a day before a very important parliamentary session tomorrow. And tomorrow, both the members of both the House of Representatives and the Senate will be meeting in an extraordinary parliamentary session to debate the ongoing political crisis, hoping that some solutions could be found among these lawmakers so that the country could emerge from this crisis. But of course, this, in the eyes of many analysts, that is certainly a wishful thinking, given the fact that the country is so polarized, and even among lawmakers themselves, there seem to be no common grounds.
Right.
And so, but anyway, the Prime Minister has been pleading with the protesters to give the Parliament time to do their work and to try to work together to find out some kind of solution. But of course, as we can see that the anti-government protesters are certainly ignoring the plea, and because they believe that the parliament is not the right place to solve the problems the country is facing. All they want now is an immediate resignation of the prime minister, which of course, as we have been saying, that the prime minister himself has shown no signs that he would give in to the demand.
So the current political situation and other issues will be high on the agenda at the parliament tomorrow.
Yeah. And of course, the focus will be on the parliament, not only because of the session in the chamber, but also activity outside the parliament itself. And today, a small group of yellow-clad demonstrators started occupying an area in front of the parliament at Gyekai area on the pretext that they would not want to see any mentioning of a reform of the monarchy during the House debate tomorrow. And that's why they were there to make their point, to deliver the message. And besides, they said they are afraid that the anti-government protesters will try to return and then try to besiege the parliament as they did last month when there was a debate on the bill seeking to amend the constitution. Remember, hundreds of anti-government protesters surrounding the parliament and boo and make noises when they knew that the parliament was not going to vote on any of the bills. And many of the government MPs who emerged from the session were certainly have fear for their life because the very threatening manners by some of the protesting demonstrators.
Right. So this is definitely high on the agenda tomorrow, whether it is the parliament session and the protesters that are planning to gather at Samyan area and then move to the German embassy. And one of our reporters are actually at the Rapasong intersection observing and covering the ongoing protests. And Kun Kitipat Chun Sukjit has a lot more on this story, so let's take a look.
Good evening, Cap. So I can say that the pro-democracy demonstration today is the consequence of the resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha from his position last night. And as the demonstration is held at Ratchaprasong intersection, the traffic police closed some part of Ramawan Road and also the Rashtamri Road from Pratu Nam intersection to Central World. And the main activities today, it was announced by Kun Pai Dowdin, or the core leader of the protest. He announced in the late afternoon that the main activities will be singing national anthem and raising three fingers together, which is passed already. And next will be at 8 p.m., which everyone will shouting against Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha together. So this demonstration is held under the idea that everyone here, every protester here is the leader. So we can see that every part of this protest, of this demonstration, they are the protester who bring their own bullhorn or the speaker and expressing their own feeling, their own political perspective. And behind the main stage, which I'm standing here, but I can't see them here, they are the activities held by the LGBT group, calling a creativity dressing under the concept of wearing black, be polite, and luxury. And lastly, the demonstration today will be end at 8:30 p.m. as the announcement by Kun Pai Dowdin this late afternoon. And this is the latest update from Ratchaprasong intersection.
So as Kun Kitipat just mentioned, the protest organizers tonight said they will try to end the rally at around 8:30 or maybe earlier than that with a statement as to what they would do next tomorrow. But as we have been saying that they plan a march tomorrow from Samyan area. toward the German embassy on South Sathorn Road, which is only a few kilometers away, to rally there and to deliver some kind of a message. We still don't know. We don't know yet what kind of message they will be delivering, but that's the plan for the protester tomorrow. And you are now watching the live feed from the Ratchaprasong intersection. We let you stay with the picture for a while and to get a feeling of what it's like there. It's still as busy as any of the previous demonstrations at the intersection.
So the scene in general is not any different to what happened on October 15th, where the protesters also gathered at this Ratchaprasong intersection, and today is not any different. And as you can see, there are still tons of protesters around the Ratchaprasong area. But you can also see that the cars and the motorcycles are trying to get through.
It's worth noting that the protesters made no mention about tomorrow's parliamentary session, and because they said they are not, they don't have any faith in the parliamentary process, and what they want to see is an immediate resignation of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, and for the parliament to take up all the proposed amendments to the constitution as proposed by the groups of people, not only those proposed by the lawmakers, but they also want the ones proposed by the civil society to be taken into consideration. And today, the Pheu Thai party, the main opposition party, the MP sat down and tried to map out the strategy for tomorrow and Tuesday, the debate. And according to the party Secretary General, Kun Prasert Chantra Ruangthong, the party's MP will try to focus on the root cause of the current political crisis. Of course, he didn't mention it, but General Prayut Chan-o-cha will certainly be cited as one of the root causes. And then the issue of the blockade of the royal motorcade, 2 weeks ago, which was cited as one of the reasons to justify the declaration of the state of emergency 2 weeks ago. Kun Prasert said this is another issue that would be raised because maybe the party certainly might have some new information to clarify the incident.
But he also said that, however, the party will not mention the issue on reform of the monarchy, but will leave that to the Cao Klai party, adding that Cao Klai will consult the parliament president as to whether the discussion on this sensitive issue should be held in a closed session.
Now, of all the political parties, Cao Klai, which is the reincarnation of the Future Forward Party, has been most adamant about having a debate on the reform of the monarchy, despite the fact that most other opposition parties are trying to steer away from this issue. And that's one reason why the groups of royalists are rallying outside the parliament building at the moment, because they are feared that there would be attempts to raise the issue of the monarchy reform. And this is something that they said they do not want to see. And then meanwhile, in many provinces today, we have seen the continuing demonstrations by yellow-clad loyalists. And this is a continuation of days of rallies, demonstrations by the royalists in many provinces. These people are out on the streets because they do not agree with the ongoing attempts by the anti-government protesters to seek a reform of the monarchy. And they believe that the monarchy is now under threat. So that's why they need to show their force and to dispute all the claims by the protesters against the monarchy.
So you can see like two different scenes between the anti-government protesters in the city as well as the royalists in many parts of Thailand in yellow shirts. So you can see different scenes right here.
So this is a poster calling on the loyalists to gather today to demonstrate their loyalty to the monarchy. So this is a scene that is repeated all over in many provinces today, and certainly there will be more of these in the coming days as the parliament begins the process of debating the ongoing political crisis.
At the same time, the pro-monarchy demonstrators have urged the members of the public to gather in front of the parliament tomorrow to oppose an opposition proposal to set up a parliamentary panel to discuss reform of the country's monarchy. And the group who call themselves the Center of People to Protect the Monarchy plans to submit an open letter to the parliament president, Chua Lik Pai, to voice their disagreement with the opposition's proposal.
And today, Kun Varong Detkit Vikram, an outspoken loyalist and leader of the so-called Thai Pakdi group, was in Khon Kaen to help organize similar demonstrations to display their loyalty to the monarchy. As we all know that Kun Vikram has been very outspoken against the ongoing anti-government protests, especially he is especially opposed to any attempt to talk about reforming the monarchy. And Kun Varong, of course, is one of those who subscribe to the so-called conspiracy theory that put blames on certain groups of politicians who they believe are behind the ongoing protests by students.
And not just only at the Rapasong intersection where the anti-government protests are being held, there are also a couple of demonstrations across the country as well.
Okay, now we take you back to Ratchaprasong again to see the latest.
And it seems like one of the protesters is making a speech right now. And during this time, you will see that some of the protests will be taking turns to express their views and reiterate their demands. And one of them is for General Prayut Chan-o-cha to resign. And as we mentioned earlier, this is another leaderless protest, as most of the key protesters are still in prison. And as Pai Dao said, everyone can become a leader. So we can see that people took this opportunity to express their views in front of so many demonstrators that are joining today.
And some of the protest organizers that we talked to admitted that they were inspired by the so-called Hong Kong model of demonstrations. And of course, they were referring to the months-long pro-democracy demonstrations in Hong Kong against what they see as the imposition of draconian laws by China on the island. And the protesters in Hong Kong, as we all know, for a while played sort of a cat and mouse game with the authorities there with their flash mob activities. And so what we have seen over the past few weeks, I mean, is certainly a reflection of what we saw in Hong Kong earlier. So we have seen, this is unprecedented. And the way that these young protesters have been organizing the rallies, the method they use, I mean, certainly unprecedented. And on most occasions, they certainly have caught authorities off guard.
This is definitely a very large crowd indeed. And like Kun Thepchai just said, the recent protests in Bangkok, we've been seeing scenes that are quite similar to the Hong Kong protests, whether it's the use of umbrellas, the use of water cannons, and the crackdown between the police and the protesters, which is something that we've seen before. in Hong Kong, whether they were, and I believe this one is in Hong
this
Kong.
from Hong Kong at the height of the protest last year.
And we see a lot of violence during that time, and
Yeah. Okay, of course, we certainly wouldn't want to see this scene in Hong Kong happen in Thailand, right?
so let's move back to the live feed from Rapasong area because we might be seeing a lot more. All right, the scene is pretty much the same, just like how we reported earlier, and this is right in front of Central World, which is one of the biggest shopping malls in the area. And as you can see, there are tons of protesters blocking the Rapasong intersection. And what you may notice is that most of the protesters are wearing black today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It might not have anything to do with their demands, but this is what we may notice.
Yeah. I think the colors they choose is like symbolic. And it's no surprise that some of the pro-democracy protest leaders in Hong Kong have been sending the messages of support to their Thai counterparts. I mean, especially Joshua Wong, the young protest leader, the best, probably among the best known protest leaders of Hong Kong, has been tweeting the messages in support of their friends in Thailand. And some of the messages were even written in Thai, saying to the effect that we support the Thai protesters.
Pretty sure that most of the Thai protesters appreciate what Joshua Wong said in support of them. And the speeches are still being made during the protesters. And what you're seeing right now, people are using their smartphones and you can see that there's a lot of light.
Yeah, the flashing.
The flashing from their screens.
Yeah. So
But if you look from a bird's eye view, you might see a prettier picture of the lights from their smartphones, and you will be able to see how many protesters have joined this movement today.
Of course, as we have been saying the whole evening, the demonstration you're seeing right now is considered by the authorities to be unauthorized, so it's illegal. It's against the law on public gatherings. The police said that the protest organizers did not seek approval from authorities for the rally. But for the time being, the police are not moving in the way that would confront the protester. But as happened in the past, the police would file charges against some of the protest leaders afterward. For example, many of the protest leaders under custody now are also being charged with joining or organizing unauthorized public gatherings. But of course, the danger of facing more serious charges is gone because of the lifting of the state of emergency a few days ago. And last week, as we remember, the Prime Minister tried to appear to be conciliatory by offering to lift the state of emergency, and he did so just a day after that. And then in exchange, he would say he would want to see protesters take a step back to avoid bringing the country into a serious crisis that with no way out. But of course, the protesters have ignored his plea and then continue to rally, as we can see now. Yeah.
And what you may notice is that for this time, instead of having a main stage for a rally, one of the protest leaders choose to make speeches using for a smaller crowd.
Yeah.
They try to avoid using a big stage and using big microphones, big speakers. So there has been a couple of reports that Pai Dao decided to communicate with a smaller crowd, so that is a lot easier.
That's a way for them to circumvent the limitations on the logistics. Because as we have been saying that this kind of gathering is spontaneous, it's a flash mob type of demonstrations, so they were not quite prepared to be ready with all this logistics, especially the sound system that would be good enough, to cover the whole area. So what they are doing tonight is to try to sort of break things into
small things.
And with even though the crowd as a whole is quite huge, but the way they communicate, they choose to separate the crowd into different groups so that that will make communication between the organizers and the crowd easier.
So it's quite different to the protest at Sanam Luang and Hamza University, where they use a very big stage to communicate with the supporters. But for the Rapasong intersection, they decided to use a smaller stage and talking to a smaller crowd, so that is a lot easier to communicate. And if you just joined us, this is the live feed from the Rapasong area where the protests are being held today. And as for tomorrow, it has been reportedly said that they will gather at Samyan area before proceeding to the German embassy tomorrow evening.
So you're watching our special edition of Thai PBS World that will giving you update on the ongoing rally at the Rajapasong intersection. We let you stay with the picture for a while.
And based on the reports, at 8 p.m., which is only a couple minutes away, the protesters will join together and chant Prayut get out during this time for at least 10 minutes before they disperse around 8:30 today. And you're seeing live images from Rapasong area. As we're reporting, the protests are still going on.
And as you may have noticed that the demonstrators have been very punctual with their time. In the previous rallies, they said they would break up, go home at 8 p.m. or sometime after that, and they did so, accordingly, and with no untoward incidents.
We noticed that the protesters have kept to their promise, just like how they communicated on social media, saying that they will come at Rapasong area at 4 p.m. and they came just on time.
And they have been arranging all these demonstrations through social media. And on some days, the protest organizers would not reveal the exact location of their planned rally until maybe 2 hours ahead of the activity. And so authorities certainly had a very tough time trying to track the movement of these protesters.
And unfortunately, we cannot give you the sound from the ongoing demonstrations because it has been reportedly said they've used a lot of profanity during their speeches. So we apologize that we cannot give you that sound, but we will give you the live pictures instead. And this is the ongoing protest at Rapasong area, which is the main rally site for today. And the protest today came in light after Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha told reporters that he will not resign and will not succumb to the pressure by the demonstrators. And that is why the protesters decided to escalate the protests, as Pai Dao did one of the key leaders mentioned last night that they will escalate the protests and will rally at Rapperswijk area today. And based on their promises, they will continue with their rally and will repeat their demands until the Prime Minister resigns. And to give you a recap of what are the key demands of the protesters this time round, one of them was to demand the Prime Minister to resign, the reform of the monarchy, as well as the redrafting of the Constitution. And additional demands include the unconditional release of the key protest leaders who are still in jail. So these are the main demands from the anti-government protesters that are coming out in Bangkok. And for the past week, you might see that the protests are moving around in many areas of Bangkok, whether it's the Democracy Monument, the Government House. Rapperswijk area was one of them, and this is the second time for this week that they gathered at this the business area in Bangkok. The business area in Bangkok has a lot of shopping malls, as you may know, Central World, Siam Paragon, Quezon Plaza, and all these places. And it has been named as the main shopping area for Bangkok. But it is also no stranger to any of the political protests, whether it's the Red Shirt movement or the Gopopasol movement. And the recent one is the anti-government protests led by Kana Rasadon.
The speaker on the back of the pickup truck you're seeing now, been trying to tell the crowd that what they're doing now is just only part of the ongoing struggle to win democracy for the country. We will try to stay with you until the protest organizers make an announcement, which they said they would do at, initially they said they would do it at 8 p.m. and they later said that they would do it at 8:30 p.m., which is about 20 minutes from now. And the crowds are chanting that Prayut get out, and mixed with some profanity.
So that is why we're not allowed to give you the sound from the protest, but we can only give you the live pictures from Rapperswijk intersection.
Now, even though all the rallies have been peaceful, well-disciplined, the demonstrators, but the language that they use sometimes can be overbearing.
A lot of profanity to keep it simple. And it really reflects how angry these protesters are against the government. So it is no surprise that if we go to any protest, you will see a lot of profanity, whether they're insulting the Prime Minister or the government as a whole, or as the political system as a whole. It is no surprise if we do hear a lot of profanity, but as we're reporting right now, we are not allowed to report the profanity, but we can give you an overview of what is going on and what are the key demands and the overall atmosphere of what is actually happening at the protest today.
So you can see, but you cannot hear. That's what we want to tell you.
Well, unfortunately, we have to say that because we are not allowed to show you any profanity.
Yeah.
And this is one of the main protests, which is part of which is part of the series that we've been seeing since October 14th, and up until now, the anti-government protests are still going on with the same key demands. And to keep it simple, the protesters will not go anywhere unless the Prime Minister resigns.
And as we have been saying that we would say most of the protesters are young people, university students, or even high school students. And one reason why high school students have been so active politically in the past few weeks, joining most of the rallies, is because they have their own grievances to air.
Right.
They believe that what they are facing, or what they see as unfair school regulations, outdated rules and regulations on the campus, is a reflection of the ills of the country. And that's why they have no hesitation to join the political rallies. But of course, they also feel that the country has been under military dictatorship for too long. And so they want to see political changes.
And as we are all aware, since the coup d'etat in 2014, Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha is in power for the past 6 years. And despite we had a tie election around last year, but it's still a controversy because instead of having a prime minister that is elected by the people, but it was Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha being in power again, elected by the 250 senators, which were chosen by the Prime Minister himself. So that would be one of the reasons why the protesters are so angry. And they felt that they want democracy back again. And I believe there's a new protester going up on stage.
We're still waiting for a formal statement from the protest organizers, because they normally would end their nightly rallies with some kind of a remarks or statement. And certainly they would have something to say about tomorrow's special parliamentary session to debate the ongoing crisis. The protesters have mentioned no plans about demonstrating at the parliament tomorrow, where already a group of loyalists wearing yellow mostly are already occupying a spot to deliver a message. The royalists said that they are there because they want to let the lawmakers understand that they would not consent to hearing any debate on a reform of the monarchy as demanded by the protesters and some of the opposition political parties.
And this is what is happening right now at Rapperswil intersection. And as for tomorrow, as we previously reported, they will gather at Samyan and will proceed to the German embassy. But it is not clear yet with the details of the protest and what will be mentioned during the demonstrations.
But of course, tomorrow's, besides the march to the German embassy, our eyes will be on the special parliamentary session. The Prime Minister certainly will be there to defend himself against charges by the protesters, and the opposition parties will certainly seize the opportunity to further attack the Prime Minister as they did in the no confidence debate just most recently. Now, in fact, some of the opposition parties initially were reluctant in attending tomorrow's session. claiming that they would not want to be seen as playing a role in whitewashing the current government, what they see as the wrongdoings of the current government. But finally, all have said they will be there for the debate.
As for the latest movement from the United Front of Thammasat and Demonstration Group, on their Twitter, an hour ago, they shared this photo, a couple of photos from the rally site, and this is actually one of them that they posted on Twitter an hour ago, and this gained a lot of retweets, up to 6,219 retweets, as well as 2,000 likes, and it keeps increasing. And this is one of the pictures from the protest earlier today, since 4 p.m. up until now, and they decided to show the highlights of the protest and posted them on Twitter. And the caption says, "Rat Prasong at this time," with the hashtag, "because everyone can be a leader," as well as another hashtag, 25th October protests.
And of course, this lady is holding a poster with the wording saying that the Prime Minister wants everyone to respect the law. But superimposed was a picture taken on the day that General Prayut led the coup d'etat against the Yingluck government. So the meaning is that someone who has broken the law is now asking people to respect the law.
So this is the latest movement from the group, the United Front of Thammasat and Demonstration Group. That is the latest tweet that they posted on their social media accounts, and not yet. And there are no developments so far from this group.
If we go back to the first picture that the Thammasat students posted, there was a message put across the flyover, right?
Yes.
In Thai, it says "Rasadon Prasong." It is very, very symbolic, because the area that we are talking about now is Rajaprasong, right?
Yep.
Which is roughly translated as royal wishes, right? But the students, the protesters have renamed the place Rasadon Prasong, that is people's wishes. They're playing with words, that between using the word people replacing the word royal.
So it's a play on word between Rat Prasong and Ratsadon Prasong. So this time around, they're trying to convey the message that this is the people's wishes. And one of the wishes is for the Prime Minister to resign.
No, in fact, the protesters have no hesitation in trying to portray their activities as a people's uprisings against the establishment. In fact, that is the message they have been sending out consistently over the past several months.
And if we look at the live pictures of the Rat Prasong area, which is where the protests are still going on, you can see that the protesters are still there and they have not dispersed. But it is reportedly that they will end peacefully around 8:30 p.m. tonight. But so far, we're not seeing any signs yet.
So I think we take a break for the time being, and then we'll come back when there is new development at the rally site then. Okay, so we come back and see you later on there.